Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, November 17th, 2021. House of Representatives censures Congressman Paul Gosar for posting an anime cartoon altered to show him appearing to kill a congresswoman and attack the president. President Biden visits a GM factory that builds electric vehicles in Detroit to promote the $1 trillion infrastructure spending bill that he signed last week. House Republicans and Democrats rallying on Capitol Hill ahead of the debate and votes on the $1.75 trillion social spending bill. A Senate confirmation hearing for FCC Chair nominee Jessica Rosenworcel, net neutrality among the topics. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visits Washington to talk trade and other issues with President Biden and the Mexican President, López Obrador. All ahead on C-SPAN Radio's Washington Today. C-SPAN's Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan tweeting 223 to 207 with one present. House censures sixth-term Arizona Republican Congressman Paul Gosar and removes him from his two committee assignments, Oversight and Reform and Natural Resources. Two Republicans voted yes with all Democrats. Liz Cheney of Wyoming, Republican, and Adam Kinzinger, the Republican from Illinois, both, by the way, on the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And one Republican voting present, David Joyce of Ohio. This comes after Congressman Gosar posted a photoshopped anime video to social media showing him appearing to kill Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and attacking President Joe Biden. This was just a week ago. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, leading the floor debate, saying that the censure resolution is necessary because Gosar violated House rules, put others in danger, and this was an attack on women.
We cannot have a member joking about murdering each other or threatening the President of the United States. This is both an endangerment of our elected officials and an insult to the institution of the House of Representatives. It's not just about us as members of Congress. It is a danger that it represents to everyone in the country. If you're viewing this and thinking, well, when you run for Congress, you get threats and the rest, you're expected to get them from your colleagues. But nonetheless, the example set in this House is one that is viewed across the country. Women across the country particularly feel vulnerable if insults of the nature that existed in this House are allowed to stand. I'll speak about that in a moment. Again, when a member uses his or her national platform to encourage violence, tragically, people listen to those words, and they may act upon them. Words spoken by elected officials weigh a ton. People hear them very differently. As the resolution that the committee is putting forth states, depictions of violence can foment actual violence and jeopardize the safety of elected officials, as witnessed in this chamber on January 6, 2021. It is inconceivable that a member of our community here would wish to repeat the violence of that dark day, that deadly day. As a woman, Speaker of the House, I want to be clear. These threats specifically target a woman of color, which is part, as the resolution states, a global phenomenon meant to silence women and discourage them for seeking positions of authority and participating in public life. Again, this is about workplace harassment and violence against women. Yet, the member has never apologized for his actions. It's a cartoon, relax, he said. Really? A cartoon? Relax? And he wrote to supporters as hyperventilating and shrill accusations that this cartoon is dangerous are laughable or intentionally hyperbolic. I'm entitled to speak to the people and to do so in a manner that is engaging, he said. Really? Is it engaging to depict killing a colleague or anyone? It's not just about members of Congress. Anyone, threatening anyone.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi during today's House floor debate. More background on this issue from the Washington Post. The vote today comes a little over a week after Congressman Gosar shared a 90-second clip that appears to be an altered version of the opening credits of the Japanese animated series Attack on Titan. The show revolves around a hero who sets out to destroy the Titans, giant creatures that have devoured nearly all human civilization. Any anime fans out there, Gosar said in the tweet in which he shared a link to the altered video. In one scene of the video, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's face is edited over one of the Titan's faces. Gosar flies into the air and slashes the Titan in the back of the neck, killing it. In another scene, Gosar swings two swords at a foe whose face has been replaced by that of President Biden. That from the Washington Post. More from the House floor debate today on the censure resolution. The Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, accusing Democrats of being hypocritical, saying they rushed to censure a Republican member but have ignored similar bad behavior from Democrats.
I listened to the Speaker talk about the highest standards. Madam Speaker, when a Democratic chairwoman flew to Minneapolis and told an angry crowd during a trial to stay on the streets, get more active, get more confrontational, we've got to make sure they know we mean business. That high standard, the Democrats refused to take action. The trial judge actually singled her out on her comments on an ongoing basis, which he said could become an issue on appeal. But this wasn't the first time. No. This is 3 times. At a rally in Los Angeles, that same chairwoman, she told a mob, if you see anyone from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them that they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. She later defended that comment in another speech in L.A., saying, the same chairwoman of the high standards, I did not threaten Trump, constituents, and supporters. I do that all the time. But I didn't do it that time. This side of the aisle didn't ask that chairwoman to lose her committee. We simply asked for an apology. Meanwhile, that high standard with Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer defended her. When asked about her Minneapolis comments, Leader Hoyer described her as passionate. She believes in her issues. She believes you should get in your faces. And Speaker Pelosi, what did she do with that high standard? She compared her comments in Minneapolis to Dr. King's civil rights movement. You see? Why would they do that? Rules for thee, but not for me.
The House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy. A few moments later, during today's House floor debate, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke. Again, she was one of the targets in that violent video posted by Congressman Gosar.
This is not about me. This is not about Representative Gosar. But this is about what we are willing to accept. Not just the Republican leader, but I have seen other members of this party advance the argument, including Representative Gosar himself, the illusion that this was just a joke. That what we say and what we do does not matter so long as we claim a lack of meaning. Now, this nihilism runs deep, and it conveys and betrays a certain contempt for the meaning and importance of our work here. That what we do, so long as we claim that it is a joke, doesn't matter. That what we say here doesn't matter. That our actions every day as elected leaders in the United States of America doesn't matter. That this chamber and what happens in it doesn't matter. And I am here to rise to say that it does. Our work here matters. Our example matters. There is meaning in our service.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And after her comments, shortly thereafter, Congressman Paul Gosar, the person in the resolution who is being censured, was yielded some time.
I rise today to address and reject the mischaracterization, accusations from many in this body that the cartoon from my office is dangerous or threatening. It was not, and I reject the false narrative categorically. I do not espouse violence towards anyone. I never have. It was not my purpose to make anyone upset. I voluntarily took the cartoon down, not because it was itself a threat, but because some thought it was. Out of compassion for those who generally felt offense, I self-censored. Last week, my staff posted a video depicting a policy battle regarding amnesty for tens of millions of illegal aliens. This is an enemy that speaks to young voters who are too often overlooked. Even Twitter, the left's mouthpiece, did not remove the cartoon, noting it was in the public's interest for it to remain. The cartoon directly contributes to the understanding and the discussion of the real-life battle resulting from this administration's open border policies. This body is considering passage of Mr. Biden's reckless, socialist, Marxist $4.9 trillion spending bill that provides $100 billion for amnesty to tens of millions of illegal aliens already in this country. This is what the left doesn't want the American people to know. Our country is suffering from the plague of illegal immigration. I don't stop pointing this out, nor will I. Millions of illegal aliens, drugs, and human traffickers are being led in and moved around our country in the dead of night, all condoned by this administration. For this cartoon, some in Congress suggest I should be punished. I have said decisively, there is no threat in the cartoon other than the threat to immigration poses to our country. And no threat was intended by my staff or me. The American people deserve to have their voices heard in Congress. No matter how much the left tries to quiet me, I will continue to speak out against amnesty for illegal aliens, defend the rule of law, and advance the American First agenda. If I must join
Gentleman's recognized 30 seconds.
If I must join Alexander Hamilton, the first person attempted to be censored by this House, so be it. It is done. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Congressman Paul Gosar. Again, the vote in the House today on a resolution to censure him and remove him from his two committee assignments was 223 to 207 with one present. Voting yes, all Democrats and two Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and the one present, David Joyce. From Ohio. We spoke with Politico congressional reporter Nicholas Wu, asking him first about how rarely the House censures a member and how fast this case came up.
Absolutely. I mean, the last censure that happened in the House was in 2010, over a decade ago, and this is something that Democrats have moved on exceptionally quickly in light of everything else going on amid this backdrop of trying to push the Build Back Better plan through the House.
In terms of severity, where does censure rank in House punishments?
It's a pretty severe House punishment. It's it's a very rare thing. Only 23 members have been censured in the entire history of the House, and although it's not severe, of course, as removing someone from the House altogether or taking them off their committees, it still does generally involve the members standing in the wall of the House and then having the censure read to them after the vote happens. And so, it's not entirely clear if that's going to happen today, though, whether or not Congressman Gosar will stand in the wall of the House.
Help us understand in context how this censure relates to how Republicans and Democrats have been relating to each other this year, especially since the attack on the U.S. Capitol January 6th.
This is an all-time low right now in relations between Democrats and Republicans in the House. I mean, after January 6th and amid everything else that's happened this year, there's really just a lot of bad blood right now between both parties and a lack of trust. And we're seeing that play out right now with this effort to censure Congressman Gosar and remove him from his committees. Since quite a few Democrats seem to believe that if this is not addressed now, there is an actual risk of violence across the country, that people may in fact be inspired by this rhetoric to act against members of Congress. And, It comes as Capitol Police have warned that threats against members have really spiked this year, and the Capitol Police went so far as to open field offices to help protect members of Congress outside of the Capitol.
Nicholas Wu, congressional reporter with Politico. Read his stories at Politico.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And in fact, Congressman Gosar did stand in the well, surrounded by other Republican members that he had invited, as the censure resolution was read to him by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. One of the high-profile defendants in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Jacob Chansley, known as the QAnon shaman, has been sentenced to 41 months in prison. It's 10 months less than what prosecutors were asking for. Chansley pleaded guilty to felony obstruction of an official proceeding. You might have seen him in photographs taken inside the Capitol that day, without a shirt, wearing a Viking hat, and a red, white, and blue face paint. This is Washington Today. A story at the Detroit News, General Motors Company-only Detroit assembly plant will kick off the next phase of the automaker's electric transition Wednesday with a grand opening event that will feature a presidential visit. President Joe Biden in attendance at GM's event to celebrate the historic moment for the Motor City and tout the $1 trillion infrastructure bill he signed Monday that allocates billions towards electric charging infrastructure. It's the Factory Zero plant in Detroit, the second EV plant GM has in North America. Here's part of the tour the president took.
One of the other reasons why we went so fast, Hayward, do you want to talk a little bit about Vinzendo and some of the training that you've had?
Well, I haven't had much with the Vinzendo, but a lot of my training came from the plant. And a lot of time we were at PPO where we learned all the different connections and how to set up the job so that it was user-friendly for the operator, so that when the operator come to the job, they would have all the elements necessary to complete the job in a successful tech time.
Oh, it's outstanding. And, we've got a seasoned, 2-3 generation workforce here, President Biden, and we just couldn't be more thankful for the hard work and what they're putting in here to
I
make
get
this
it.
successful.
I'm an automobile guy. We used to have the second largest GM plant in America. In Delaware. And we had literally, when I got elected in 1972 as a young senator, we had 30,000 UAW members. We had Chrysler, General Motors, Mopar, Autolite, and the truckers. And in total, we had almost 10% of our state was UAW workers, small state. We don't have any of it now, but then my dad ran the largest automobile facility in the state of Delaware. And so I was raised, I'd go up to Mannheim Auto Auction to help them fill up their used car lot every Friday. And at Delaware University, you couldn't have a car, but I could get 8 guys. I got paid $10 a car that got back to the shop, and I'd give them 5, and I'd take down. That's how I got to see my wife I fell in love with up in Syracuse, New York every weekend. And, so I spent a lot of time with UAW, first outfit to ever endorse me.
President Joe Biden in Detroit touring the GM plant that builds electric vehicles. GM plans to have 5 total in North America and sell 1 million EVs globally by 2025 and sell only zero-emission cars and trucks by 2035. This is part of the tour that the president is taking around the country, promoting the $1 trillion infrastructure spending bill that he signed into law this week. The Hill newspaper reporting House Democrats eyeing a Friday vote on the $1.75 trillion climate and benefits package. At the heart of President Biden's domestic policy agenda, party leaders are racing to approve the bill and send it to the Senate before the week-long Thanksgiving recess, which begins this weekend. Ahead of the official House floor debate, both Republicans and Democrats today holding rallies and news conferences about the bill on the U.S. Capitol grounds. We'll start with the Republicans on the House steps. Jason Smith of Missouri, ranking member on the Budget Committee.
For months, the Democrats have been obsessed with passing a reckless tax and spending piece of legislation while ignoring the needs of working-class Americans. Working-class Americans right now are concerned of how they will put food on their table, clothes on their backs, and gasoline in their cars. And just since Joe Biden has become president of the United States, inflation has risen by more than 7%. This bill that is before us, this tax and spending bill, is marked with numerous budget gimmicks and shell games to hide the true cost of the spending. Even independent analysis from numerous economists, even the New York Times, has predicted that this bill is more than double of what the Democrats are saying. Right now, we are facing inflation at the highest amount in 40 years, and their solution is to spend more money. That is not the solution for America. That is not the solution for real Americans who we represent. The CBO has scored roughly 12% of this legislation, 8 of 13 committees. What we do know is that this bill does not pay for itself, regardless of President Biden saying that it will cost zero. What we do know is that this piece of legislation in 5 years will add more than $800 billion to the national debt. That doesn't sound like it cost zero. We hear Democrats say they're fighting for working class families. All you have to do is read the text of this legislation and know that this bill is all about the wealthy. The second largest program in this bill is a large tax cut for the 1%ers.
Republican Congressman Jason Smith, ranking member on the Budget Committee, joining other House Republicans on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building today, ahead of the debate expected on Thursday, perhaps a vote on Friday on the $1.75 trillion social spending and tax bill. Also on Capitol Hill, earlier in the day, House Democrats holding their own news conference, not far from where the Republicans were, promoting the climate provisions in the bill. Here's Veronica Escobar of Texas.
The choice could not be more clear. The choice is either between urgent action or anything less than that is the equivalent of inaction. Inaction, we have already seen and witnessed where we're headed with it. I represent El Paso, Texas, a community in the Southwest that is warming faster than most other communities, where we are seeing increasing triple-digit temperatures, longer, hotter summers, in a community that has long been economically disadvantaged. That is killing people. I also represent El Paso as a border community. And for those who've been covering the movement of migrants across our hemisphere, there is no doubt that much of that migration is coming from the climate crisis. And what we are seeing is increased poverty and famine in our hemisphere. And unless we do something, we should expect all of those images and all of that humanitarian need only continue to be exacerbated. So that is our choice. We can either take action this week on what is an important key component in keeping our COP26 commitments, in building a new economy, in ensuring that there's equity and the vulnerable are protected, and more importantly, that we are able to have a planet where we and future generations can live. So the choice for me is clear. I cannot wait to walk up those steps and vote for Build Back Better and begin the hard work that it will take to preserve our beautiful environment and make sure that this sweet note from Mom's Clean Air Force, from a child who is asking us to protect them, to make sure that we keep our promise for those kids.
Democratic Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, news conference with other House Democrats outside the U.S. Capitol building today. The Congressional Budget Office says it expects to release a final analysis of the cost and revenue-raising projections from this bill, the Build Back Better bill, also known as the Budget Reconciliation Bill or the Social Spending and Tax Bill. Release that on Friday. It's something a few moderate House Democrats had demanded, a CBO scoring, and their votes will be needed to pass this bill if all Republicans, as expected, vote no. President Biden asking the Federal Trade Commission to investigate what is behind high gasoline prices, writing a letter to the FTC Chair, Lina Khan, saying there is, quote, mounting evidence of anti-consumer behavior by oil and gas companies. This issue came up today during the confirmation hearing of an FTC commissioner, Alvaro Bedoya. Questions from Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut.
We're fortunate to have a nominee to the FTC with us this morning, and even more fortunate that the President of the United States has asked the FTC to investigate skyrocketing gasoline prices. I'm a veteran of a number of these investigations, having served as Attorney General of Connecticut. It is a challenging issue, but one that has to be faced. What we're seeing is that the costs of refined product are diminishing, but consumers see at the pump soaring prices and rising profits as well on the part of the major gas companies and stock buybacks. So this investigation is overdue, absolutely necessary, should be pursued vigorously and promptly. The present monopolistic practices of these companies need to be exposed for what they are so consumers understand why prices are rising. And we need to call attention as well to the monopolistic prices of OPEC and the producers of gasoline. There's no reason that consumers should be left in the dark about why gasoline prices at the pump are rising so astronomically. And I will just cite, if the gap between refined fuel costs and gasoline prices at the pump were to return to normal pre-pandemic levels, drivers would be paying as much as 25 cents less per gallon. 25% less per gallon is real money in consumers' pockets, and an effective investigation will help achieve that goal. Mr. Bedoya, do you support this investigation?
Absolutely, in principle, Senator. Gas prices matter for everyone, and they particularly matter for folks living paycheck to paycheck. And I'd add that I believe there's a 2007 petroleum manipulation rule, and if confirmed, Senator, I would try to make sure that that is enforced rigorously.
The FTC, as you know, is an independent agency, but I urge consumers to write to you, to call you as an agency, to make their real-life stories known to you, because that's the most powerful evidence. Their faces and voices can have a real impact. They can make a difference. So thank you for that answer.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat, questioning Alvaro Bedoya, nominated to be commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission, the hearing today of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. Average price of a gallon of gas in October in the U.S., $3.38. That's the highest in 3 years. On Wall Street, the Dow down 211, NASDAQ down 52, S&P down 12. From Associated Press, the Pentagon will increase housing payments for troops in key areas and look for ways to combat hunger across the force, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced Wednesday in the department's latest effort to address food insecurity among service members. Secretary Austin spoke in the Pentagon briefing room.
Today, I've directed the department to take several steps to strengthen the economic security of our force. First, we're providing some immediate relief. The Department of Defense has temporarily raised the basic allowance for housing in areas that have had a 10% increase in rental costs this year. And in places with housing shortages, we're extending temporary lodging expense reimbursements so that families have more time to find a home that fits their needs. And when it comes to making sure our people have enough to eat, we've created a new toolkit that will help leaders identify service members who are struggling and connect service members and their families to resources and support programs and more. I've also directed the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to develop a strategy and implementation roadmap within 90 days to strengthen food security across the force. Now, the steps outlined in today's memo won't solve all the economic worries that our military families face, but they are important steps, and we're committed to getting this right. Our men and women in uniform and their families have enough to worry about. Basic necessities like food and housing shouldn't be among them. This is a readiness issue.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in the Pentagon briefing room. More from the Associated Press article, service members who do not live on bases get a housing allowance, which is counted as income in calculating their eligibility for food stamps. That additional amount, which is not counted as income for other federal programs, often enough to disqualify families for the food assistance. Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN offers a variety of podcasts that have something for every listener. Weekdays, Washington Today gives you the latest from the nation's capital. And every week, Book Notes Plus has in-depth interviews with writers about their latest works. While The Weekly uses audio from our immense archive to look at how issues of the day developed over years. And our occasional series, Talking With, features extensive conversations with historians about their lives and work. Many of our television programs are also available as podcasts. You can find them all on the C-SPAN Now mobile app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now app and wherever you get your podcasts. On COVID-19, this from the New York Times, Moderna has asked federal regulators to authorize booster shots of its coronavirus vaccine for all adults, a request that the Food and Drug Administration could grant as early as this week, along with a similar request from Pfizer, according to people familiar with the planning. If the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention also signs off, every adult who was fully vaccinated with the Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna shot at least 6 months ago would not only be eligible for a booster, but could choose which vaccine. The agency's Committee of Independent Experts set to meet Friday to discuss booster shots. Well, this all came up at today's White House COVID-19 response team briefing. The question to the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
Let's go to Cheyenne Haslett at ABC News.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. My first question is on boosters. J&J boosters are already recommended for all adults. Pfizer boosters for all adults are expected by Friday to be authorized. Will the FDA consider Moderna in this upcoming authorization too? And my second question is on the confusing patchwork of booster recommendations in different states this past week. And I'm wondering why have the CDC and FDA not spoken out to give uniformed guidance as that has happened? Thank you.
Dr. Walensky?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Cheyenne. And maybe I'll just answer them all together and say we are actively following the science and the data. We know now that tens of millions of Americans are eligible for boosters, and we are encouraging everyone who is eligible, and especially those who are most vulnerable, those over the age of 65, those with underlying medical conditions, to go and get your booster right now. And as you noted, the FDA is actively reviewing data and we are in close touch with them. As soon as the FDA reviews those data and provides an authorization, we at CDC will act swiftly. We will be reviewing the epidemiologic data, the effectiveness data, as well as the safety data, and we will provide our recommendations as soon as we can.
Dr. Rochelle Walensky is director of the CDC. Also on today's virtual White House briefing, the COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients speaking about a new effort to dramatically expand U.S. vaccine manufacturing capability.
Already, we've ramped up manufacturing here and abroad, built out a sustainable supply chain, and increased capacity globally to make vaccines. Today, we're taking another major step to bolster vaccine manufacturing, both for this pandemic and to prepare for any future threats. HHS is soliciting interest from companies that have experienced manufacturing mRNA vaccines to identify opportunities to scale up their production capacity. Importantly, initial production could provide more mRNA COVID vaccines for the world. The goal of this program is to expand existing capacity by an additional 1 billion doses per year, with production starting by the second half of 2022. This program would also help us produce doses within 6 to 9 months of identification of a future pathogen and ensure enough vaccines for all Americans. It would combine the expertise of the U.S. government in basic scientific research with the robust ability of pharmaceutical companies to manufacture mRNA vaccines. We hope companies step up and act quickly to take us up on this opportunity to expand production of mRNA vaccines for the current pandemic and set us up to react quickly to any future pandemic threats.
White House COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients. He also said when it comes to vaccination of 5 to 11-year-olds in the U.S., in the first 10 days, they have now been eligible. 10% of the 28 million children have gotten at least the first of 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. That's the only one currently authorized. Also, some sad news related to the coronavirus pandemic. The National Center for Health Statistics saying in the 12-month period that ended in April, more than 100,000 Americans have died from overdoses. That's up 30% from the deaths the previous year, and the first time that figure has topped 100,000. Daily.com covering today's confirmation hearing for Jessica Rosenworcel to be the permanent chair of the Federal Communications Commission, writing that she reiterated her support for net neutrality on Wednesday and said there was a need for oversight of the broadband industry. Net neutrality is the principle that Internet service providers must treat all Internet content equally, not discriminate or charge different rates. Policy has gone back and forth in the past presidential administrations. Question today from Senator Roger Wicker, ranking Republican on the Commerce Committee.
With the regulation on net neutrality that was repealed under the last administration, it seems to me we did better than Europe under the light touch appropriation, under the light touch regulation. Broadband usage increased significantly, and companies invested in broadband in America. Unlike in Europe, we did not have to ask providers to throttle service or take other measures to reduce traffic. Can you tell us what, if any, disadvantages occurred to our country or to consumers when we repealed the Obama administration net neutrality rules? Or am I correct that we had a lot more build out and no throttling or measures to reduce traffic?
Thank you for the question. I think you know that I support net neutrality. I supported it in 2015, and then I opposed the rollback in 2017. I continue to support it. I think the investment record is something we always have to pay attention to, because as we develop rules at the FCC, we've got to be mindful what the impact is on infrastructure in this country. That being said, I think the impact of the rollback in 2017 is broader than just net neutrality, because it took the FCC away from oversight of broadband. And coming out of this pandemic, I think, all of us know that we need some oversight because it's become such an essential service for day-to-day life.
Well, let me just ask you to submit on the record a specific answer to examples of consumers being harmed by the repeal of net neutrality regulation.
I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Roger Wicker, ranking Republican on the Commerce Committee. He's from Mississippi, questioning the FCC chair nominee Jessica Rosenworcel, a Democratic nominee. Lots of other topics coming up during today's confirmation hearing. Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from Minnesota, asking about Next Generation 911.
I was honored to have you in Minnesota. You came to talk about 911 many, many, many years ago and the importance of upgrading that. And could you talk about how you'll continue to make that in this changing world where people are making emergency calls by text and where we have people maybe marooned in the middle of a snowstorm in Minnesota, and if their cell phone goes off, what happens? All these things keep happening in our state. Firefighters being able to have actual plans before they go into a building. Could you talk about your plans there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator, for the question. You may only call 911 once in your life, but it's going to be the most important call you ever make. And when you make it, you absolutely want first responders to find you. And we are on the cusp of updating 911 in this country to Next Generation 911, which will provide so much more functionality than just traditional voice. It could be video, data, and information that can help public safety address your needs when they arrive. And I think the way to do that is we're going to need to standardize our definitions of next generation 911. We're going to have to identify new funding sources. Traditionally, this has been done at the local level, and this probably needs a federal boost. And in addition, we're going to have to continue work to make sure that wireless calls result in public safety being able to find you in a snowstorm or in a building or anywhere you might be using that device to reach out for help.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm chair of the 911 caucus. I should have mentioned, you know that. We're excited we're going to get some funding, I believe, in this reconciliation bill, and we will move forward from there.
Senator Amy Klobuchar and Jessica Rosenworcel, nominee for FCC Chair. If the Senate confirms Rosenworcel and another President Biden nominee to the commission, Gigi Sohn, Democrats would have a 3-2 majority on the FCC. From CBC in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived in Washington, D.C. today with a warning about legislation Democratic lawmakers are on the cusp of advancing through Congress. One element in particular has Canadian policymakers terrified, a tax credit for electric vehicles that favors cars assembled in the U.S., prompting warnings from Ottawa of lost jobs, disrupted supply chains, and a retreat from 6 decades of cooperation in auto production. Of course, this is the $1.75 trillion social spending bill, also known as budget reconciliation or Build Back Better. Prime Minister Trudeau talking about U.S.-Canada trade during a stop today at the Woodrow Wilson Center.
The figure that we remember and put forward in Canada most is $2 billion every single day in value of goods and services crossing our border with the United States. And when the pandemic hit, for example, one of our big priorities was, of course, keeping people safe. But part of keeping people safe is making sure that the flow of essential goods and services and, quite frankly, consumer goods and everything that you could possibly imagine continued despite the fact that we were shutting down the border. And that's where the cooperation and the integration of our economies made for extremely good working and alignment that was able to continue to have things go even in an unprecedented event, because we have such deep connections in supply chains, in reliance, in partnerships. I mean, one of the issues that I pointed out when we were looking at possible disruptions of medical supplies coming from the United States to Canada was there are thousands of nurses and doctors across Canada who every day go down to work in hospitals and health centers in the United States, and that it is a two-way street that we do well when we're working together. And I think the emphasis that we're going to have in this in these meetings today isn't just that, it's in Canada's interest to continue the smooth flow of goods and services across our border. It's also very much in the United States' interests. The jobs that are created and maintained because of integrated supply chains across our border in everything from autos to high-level manufacturing to goods and services to natural resources to energy, all these different things that flow back and forth with this reliable relationship and friendship that has lasted for years. It is in our mutual interest to ensure that that continues, not just to go as it did, but at a time when supply chains are disrupted around the world, where people are rethinking, well, where are we getting things from, and what happens if there are breakdowns, either political or geographic or climate related. How do we ensure resilience in our supply chains? Well, to go back to the critical minerals example, the U.S. Could do worse than rely on its closest friend, its oldest friend, its most reliable friend for ensuring that we're able to be strong and resilient in a North American context in an unstable world.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the Woodrow Wilson International Centers for Scholars in Washington today, joined by Deputy Prime Minister and other cabinet ministers. It's his first visit, by the way, since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. He mentioned meetings he's having today. That's with leaders of the U.S. Congress. Tomorrow, he meets with President Joe Biden and the Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador separately before the three get together for the North American Leaders Summit, also known as the Three Amigos Summit. In Great Britain, an unusually tense Prime Minister's question time today, as the Daily Mail reports that Prime Minister Boris Johnson was brutally rebuked by the Speaker as he tried to turn the tables on Keir Starmer. The Premier repeatedly tried to grill the Labour leader over his past legal work as the pair clashed over sleaze at the weekly session, but Speaker Lindsay Hoyle demanded he stop, insisting it is questions the Prime Minister rather than the opposition leader. Here's a bit of it.
Prime Minister! I'm very happy to publish all the details of the Randox contracts, which have been investigated by the National Audit Office already. We're talking of cover-ups. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but we still have not heard why the Honourable Gentleman will not tell...
Order. Minister, Prime Minister, sit down. Prime Minister, I'm not going to be challenged. You may be the Prime Minister of this country, but in this House, I'm in charge, and we're going to carry on.
Part of Prime Minister's Question Time today, a weekly tradition in Britain, and C-SPAN has covered this for decades. You can find today's full video and previous ones as well at our video library, cspan.org. Thanks for listening today to Washington Today. For more top Washington stories sent right to you, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word, at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Thursday morning, we'll discuss the latest on President Biden's Build Back Better agenda and the current state of the U.S. economy with Kentucky Republican Congressman James Comer and Illinois Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Thursday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.